Okay, well, I know Steve wants to, you know, he has some issues here.
Karen and Andrew are coming?
I was just gonna announce that. So Karen and Andrew are coming probably in a few minutes because the select board had a work session today to go over our recommendations and also more of their own recommendations, cuts to the town proposed budget. So they will be here to present those in a little bit. And we also need to, they have 2 more warrant articles. I believe they're kind of pass-throughs, but we need to address them with a vote. So that's that.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, let's not forget to accept the minutes.
And how many do we have to accept?
My name
Oh, yes.
needs to get changed.
Okay.
I know some people used to call me,
Oh,
spell with a B.
oh, okay. All right.
My father said if I was gonna spell a PH, I would have called you Stefan.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, okay, yes, procedurally, with regards to the minutes, which have been done copiously by Heather, you know, has everybody received all those minutes? Mm-hmm. And are there any errors or omissions in those minutes that anybody would like to notate?
I
Yes.
got one on the 18th. Now, correct me, but it said in reference to the sewer project and the rural development grant and the USDA rural development grant application due December 31st, 2018, estimated 19.1 rate increase on taxes. Isn't that sewer user fees?
Yes.
Not
The
taxes.
tax is
Right,
a fee, but not
not
property
everyone.
tax. No, not property tax. Yes. And Andrew, how are you? Okay, so yes, that would be the sewer user's fee. Feels like the tax, but it comes from a
But-
different level.
It's not.
And
a
not everyone.
property
No,
tax.
and it's not a bond, that's right, exactly.
Okay. And then spelling of the name.
Like Stevens, don't spell Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, like the Archangel.
You got that?
And it's E-V. E-V.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Anything else in the minutes that we've all received, budget?
So that's the 11th and the 18th that we're accepting
Yes.
tonight?
Okay.
So moved?
So a motion made by Diane, seconded to accept the minutes of 12/11 and 12/18 as submitted by Heather. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. And was there anything else on the budget committee listing? There was no other
No,
issue
no,
with
it's,
names or
no.
omissions, whatever? Okay.
Oh, we are going through their updates.
Yes, okay. But we're gonna wait for Karen for that, or no?
You can start.
Yeah.
I'll wait for Karen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
She's on her way.
Okay, well, there's a couple of things procedurally I'd like to go over based on our last school board meeting that I guess I'm a bit perplexed about. I've thought about it quite a bit since, haven't got it straight in my mind in terms of what happened or why or what was authorized or not authorized, but the main issue was, I mean, Ralph, obviously you took exception to what I suggested to the school board with regards to things that they could or should look at as far as their budgeting process in light of the anticipated article on the purchase of land and the funding of engineering studies. I was a bit surprised, I guess. But I guess I'd like to know your perception of what you think I was saying or trying to do that you thought was out of line.
When you made 3 suggestions to the school board. That's the first time I heard those 3 suggestions. They were never discussed at any meeting here. You go back to all the minutes. Those suggestions were never discussed. The only thing we ever discussed with the school board was the $990,000 being bonded. Then all of a sudden, we're sitting there as part of the committee, and you're making this suggestion to the school board that we never voted on or discussed as a committee. You were representing the committee, not you. And I felt that you were representing yourself at that point because the committee never discussed those items. And I didn't think it was right that you present that to them from this committee because we never agreed to it. So that was my perception.
Okay. The one thing I don't remember, I don't remember if I prefaced my remarks with we or I can't think about.
Steve, clearly you presented those as the committee. Because when you started talking, I turned to Jim and I said, when did we talk about this? And he said we haven't.
Okay. And did I say we or did I say I?
You said the committee, the budget committee.
No, I think he said we.
He said we.
I'm pretty sure he said we. We.
Okay. So if I did say we instead of I, obviously I made a mistake because I should not have said we. I should have said that there were items that I would have liked to suggest. And there were things that, yes, we had not discussed as a committee, but we have been discussing amongst some of the members of the committee. Not on an official basis, but yes. So anyway,
And I don't think that's legal, is it? To discuss, for you two to get together and discuss stuff
I think you're
to
presuming
present and the
there.
rest of us not, is that legal?
I think you're presuming there. You're
What am I
presuming a lot
presuming?
about, we had special meetings to go over this.
Well,
We
somewhere
really
along the
didn't.
line, you guys must have discussed that.
Is it kind of like, excuse me, Ralph, is it kind of like selectmen, 3 selectmen can't get together, but 2 can?
well, no,
No,
two
no,
can't.
no,
Two
no.
can't.
No, not
Selectmen
unless it's
can't.
public.
But so as a
If there's
committee.
Not unless it's public.
We can talk, Ralph and I can go off and talk, and that's not a committee.
It can't be the majority. So if
Can't
there
be
are
a
5
quorum.
selectmen, 2 can get together.
But we could have meetings among 3 of us, but that's not counted, right?
Correct.
Yeah, actually, you have a meeting amongst 4, and it wouldn't be a meeting because it's just 4. In our current selectmen's mode, you can't have 2, which is
Right,
one of
because that's a
the...
quorum.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So, can I add a little something
Oh,
here?
please do.
So I was looking back, and yeah, I think we were a little bit, I don't know, pressured for time. And we've already talked about this kind of, in general, how can we make it better for next year, because we just didn't have a lot of time to discuss things. And even that meeting on Tuesday was packed full with more presentations and more, information. And by the time we got to the end of that, we never really had time to globally talk about it. So I feel bad about that. And yes, it should have been talked about amongst us. And hopefully tonight we can, get more out on the table because we don't have a lot of presentations. So I do feel, like everyone was under the gun that night. And plus, we never really knew fully until that night exactly what the school had planned. So we're trying to condense it all down before the holidays. So it was under the gun, and I think there was a misstep, and that's all it was. It wasn't really intentional on anything else, but it was a misstep, and it should have been addressed as a committee. And that's all it was.
I wasn't trying to speak for you, Ralph, but I mean, those were 3 items that I had been thinking about for a while. In general, and I'll be talking about the school board without them here, so to speak, to defend themselves, but, we, obviously, the budget committee, as traditionally, we certainly have challenged the select board and the town manager and whatever on many an occasion, to kind of come up with some new ideas, some new approaches or whatever. The school board, that interaction hasn't occurred as often as probably what it could have or should have in the past. But there again, to give credit to, the current superintendent's leadership or whatever, I mean, we're way ahead of the schedule of what it would have been in past years. I mean, that some of this stuff traditionally would have been discussed until mid-January. So we're at least making progress. And obviously the work that Diane did this year to try to get a lot of the outside agencies on board earlier, just so that we weren't trying to deal with that at the last moment. also. So, I mean, there's been some improvement, but anyway, I certainly, if I didn't intend that, and if I said we instead of I, that's my mistake. I wasn't presenting it, or I didn't intend to present it to the school board as coming from a vote of the committee. I was presenting it from me as 3 items that I thought they could take into consideration. You know, when you're trying to sell a project of this size, and this hopefully is nothing new to anybody, I mean, there is a tradition or a strategy that when you try to sell a big project, that you try to show the voter that you're trying to do everything that you can to, you know, mitigate the impact of what you're asking them for by showing, you know, restraint, if you would, in other areas. So the suggestions that I made with regards to, you know, level funding their budget, targeting, and the other piece that, you know, is often forgotten with the school is, regardless of what they fund the budget at, given their history of surpluses, which is not all bad, but the fact that a surplus on the school side there's no option to put it into surplus as there is on the town side, or retaining it. I mean, by law, I guess, it has to be given back to reduce taxes. And so if they have a lower budget, which results in a lower surplus, there may actually be no positive impact in terms of reducing the tax rate. So that's why I put that piece in there, because that is something that in past years hadn't been discussed the way it should be. And then, you know, the last thing had to do with those warrant articles, that if the school has sufficient funds for rainy day issues, if you would, that, you know, this wouldn't be a bad year to leave those funds at their current levels, bypass that, you know, that option to retain. The other thing, if you remember, that was kind of strange on that happened last year or the year before. I believe those articles are written that authorizing the school to retain up to $50,000, for example, for heating oil or special ed. But somehow, even though it's worded that up to, they say that even that by law or somehow by definition, they have to, if they choose to retain any, they have to retain the full $50,000 or whatever the amount of the article is, which never made any sense to me, but that's what they say.
Right, if they have, let's say if they have 300,000 unexpended funds at the end of the year, and the warrant articles say 80,000, they have no option but to retain that 80,000, because they can take that full amount out of the 300. If they only had 60,000 at the end of the year, it would only be 60,000 that would go into it. But they have no choice to alter that if they have the sufficient funds to you know, do that warrant article.
So anyway, those are my suggestions, and I mean, those suggestions were made, and the whole discussion was, you know, geared toward making this whole process, or the first step in this process, more likely to succeed. You know, certainly in my mind, I wasn't doing any of this, you know, to lessen the likelihood of it passing, but I have significant, if you would, reservations about them asking to fund that warrant article as a one-time payment. I mean, you know, given the fact that you know, any year after you've had a revaluation, you know, but you've heard Brian say, you know, the third of the town goes up and the third goes down and the third stays the same. Well, certainly the third that goes up generally isn't happy if you're in that third. So, you know, it's not generally a good year for people wanting to spend.
Steve, we all understood your points and why you presented them. They all made sense. It was just a simple use of we.
Yeah.
So,
Well, but I want to apologize to the committee
but you have, so.
if I overstepped, because that is not my intention, was not my intention.
God, we try to be so transparent,
Okay.
it's unbelievable.
But the points I made were points that I felt I wanted to make and should be made, so.
Could I have 2 questions? I wasn't at the meeting. One's on the 900,000. Is it $1.10 per? It's not $1.10 per thousand. It's just $1.10.
10 on the tax rate.
It's just that if a family's paying $2,100, they will now pay $2,101. Is that right? It's per the it's on the tax rate.
No, it's
Tax rate.
per thousand.
Per thousand.
$1.10 per thousand.
Okay. Second question.
Yeah, so if you had a home worth valued at $100,000, it'd be $110.
$110.
Right.
Okay. Second question is, Can we discuss, you know, we are called the town school budget committee. Can we discuss school budgets without the school board? Or do they have to be part of this? Have we discussed Andrew's things without him? I can't recall. So I'm confused, guys.
He always shows up.
Yeah, I sure.
Yeah, he always
He
shows
always
up.
shows up.
So is there a
can.
time that we will have a work session to address the budget other than Tom Michael just going through every line?
Well, we've had
We've
meetings.
done that. I mean, I don't know if we plan to do any more. I don't know what we plan to do today, but it's always best if they are here and we can talk to them, but we don't have to take action, we can actually talk and
Well, I
then
would like
be
to
able
propose
do
that we
it.
have a work session with them or without them, whichever they choose, to go over some statistical analysis that I have completed. And it doesn't have to be today by any means. Because there's a public hearing on
Are we gonna have another
January.
one in January anyway?
That's the public hearing. Are we gonna have another meeting? Another budget meeting?
Well, I mean, we should be having a meeting with the school to take a vote
Anyways.
on whatever they,
Yeah,
because like Diane made the point, I mean, whatever they decide to do, whatever they put on the warrant,
Right.
if, including their budget, if we didn't vote on it, there would automatically be a negative vote.
Because I want to address the budget again, the budget itself.
well, so I think we're waiting for the completion of their negotiations for the land acquisition. They don't, at that time, they hadn't completed that.
Because they don't have, otherwise we don't know what they're doing. I mean,
We don't know what they're doing, we don't know how much, it could be less, it could be more, we don't know. And then if it's more, then what do we do with the budget? Do we make adjustments? Do we not make adjustments? So I have always felt that this budget committee has always wanted to see the full package before
Okay,
they really
all right.
vote on something. So that was the reason why I said, you know, we need to see the whole thing. So that will be coming up in January, I'm sure. I guess I can I'm thinking everyone at the school's probably not in this week. But I will send out an email to the superintendent and ask if we can have another meeting.
And if you'll give me 20 minutes at least of that meeting, please.
Okay.
And then I believe people have until January 9th to submission additional warrant articles, just in case there's you want to meet and vote on those.
Okay, so we have to, so everything has to be, so there's still a couple of things that you all have to do.
And a little hard to vote on some of those things while they're negotiating, because obviously you don't want to tie their hands in negotiation.
Exactly.
But like Dan said,
I understand.
it's hard to finally give it a blessing in some form until you actually know what the numbers are.
And I think it's wise what you say, Diane, that we look at the whole picture.
I mean, it's only right to do that.
But I don't think we have not scrutinized in my opinion, we have not scrutinized the school budget like we have the town budget. And they need that attention.
We haven't in past years scrutinized it.
No, we haven't. I think we have a hard time understanding everything, but I think Mel has done some statistical analysis that might help us go forward, but it's so employee-driven. It's hard to get in there and see what positions are needed, or if they're needed full-time or part-time, or, you know, it's just hard. I don't know
Yeah, I mean,
how to say it.
the form, I mean, obviously, not that we're policemen or firemen or highway workers, but, you know, the town structure is something that we're all much more familiar
Exactly.
with. I don't know what front of your police, but, you know, but we can understand a department, you know, better. In the school, in some ways, in past years, they have presented it, you know, as in more of a Lakeway budget, a middle school, but, you know, which helps you a little bit, but it's still, you know, just getting the codes, reading the thing, and trying to figure out what code is what, and having that in your mind is a challenge.
We have to do that, and I will share what I've learned in the last 2 months at that meeting.
So one of the other things about the school, and it's not to take a vote tonight,
No, no.
but to have you think about it. So for the reserve accounts, they often at the very end or during the process of the year, they have the authority to take money out of the reserve accounts and do projects. But over the past 3 or 4 years, instead of putting maintenance issues into the budget, it's more or less, it's unworn to the taxpayer. Let me just phrase it that way. Do you understand what I'm saying?
That's right, yeah.
And I don't know how you all feel about that. I just feel everything should be warned, and they can still say, we're going to offset this expense by taking it out of the reserve accounts, but it's not warned at all. And so maybe that's a discussion you all can have when, you know, we have the next meeting. I just think the taxpayers have the right to know what the projects are and have it be warned. So that's just one thing on my side. Otherwise, it's almost like a nutshell game. You know, it goes back and forth, and no one knows what's actually being done. So that's just a little thing.
Yeah, so what's being warned is in the springtime, they have the article to put up to $50,000 from surplus into the building repair.
Yeah.
But maybe those funds are already actually targeted for a certain building repair, but that's never mentioned in the budget because it's
Not warned. The other thing too is the reserve accounts. Years and years and years ago, there was a surcharge applied to the Career and Technical Center tuition. And that surcharge is allowed by the state in order to put money into the building. For instance, a sending school does not have to send a student to our Career and Technical Center, but we have to be ready. So we always have to maintain our programs for at least 2 years, whether there's enrollments or non-enrollments. You almost have to give a 2-year warning. We had a huge leak in the garden roof at one time that it's almost like $300,000. We couldn't get anyone to even come and look at it because of the liability. They couldn't figure out where the leak was coming from, and they'd have to rip up all you remember the top of the CTC? And that's when I realized they don't even have to put money into the maintenance of the building, even though we are a regional school. So a surcharge, the state, from the inception of the Career and Technical Centers, allowed a surcharge, but we just never acted upon it. So after a while, the school board, decided to implement that surcharge. And that surcharge had to have specifics for what that money could be used for. And it was, so there was, yes, we're going to apply it, and yes, we're going to set up this account. So there were 2 warrant articles that the voters had to vote on, and they passed it. And the other one was what it was going to be used. It was a receiving account, and part of it could be used to offset bond payments. Okay? It can be offset not only for equipment, not only for maintenance, but it could also be used for bond payments. So they have $400,000 in this account, reserve account, this year. I'm just saying that perhaps it can be suggested that they use some of that money to offset the bond payment to help lower the taxes for this year. It might be just a one-time thing because we have a $900,000 warrant article sitting on this side. Could they help soften that by targeting some of that money from the reserve account? That needs to be discussed with you guys and with them.
So that's
when you
in the
have the
trust,
next meeting.
that's in the trust funds, right?
It would have to be if it's part of their trust.
Right.
Yeah,
But I think the trustees.
trustees, trust funds,
maintain
yeah.
that fund.
That's all. I'm just saying, you don't want to always use it because you need it for maintenance down the road, but if you have a heavy year like this, maybe you want to use some of it. So just a suggestion for you all to discuss.
I think it's worthwhile. It's kind of like hidden funds that we don't quite know about. Sorry.
But the primary intent of that fund is when you're gonna renovate that building, when you're gonna renovate the CTC. That's the primary purpose. You can use it for other things.
You can use it for other things, but at the time that those two accounts were set up, it was to offset that, and it hasn't been used for that for a very long time. And I can understand the decision not to do that because you get some big projects coming down the road, but when you have a heavy year like this, maybe you could. So that might be a recommendation from the budget committee.
But sometimes it just comes down to a little bit of good faith. You're showing the taxpayer that you're being considerate of them when you're asking them to make a big commitment.
And on that note, may I ask again about the 900,000? If it's $1.10, the average homeowner will pay one time, if they go one time, a one-time charge of $200 versus
On the $180,000 valuation.
$181,000 later versus $20 if it's bonded out
Yeah, or 10.
or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's
Just
that.
information.
Well, even if they could use a warrant article to use 300,000 of that money that Diane's talking about and putting only 600,000 for the taxpayer to hit the taxpayer, that wouldn't be as big as the $1.10. That would be more like 70 cents, 75 cents. Just thinking
Right,
of
rough numbers.
Yeah,
Two
so
thirds.
anyways,
Yeah.
Two-thirds of that.
yeah.
Ralph, is it your understanding, is based on your committee's work and their recommendation to the school board, is it your understanding that they are committed to waiting for school building aid funding?
Not committed to it, but the committee that I was on, we're making a suggestion to, we're hearing it could come back in 2 to possibly 3 years at the most. It could be back next year. We're hearing this from representatives that some of us have talked to, that they're working on trying to get it back. Our idea is to get shovel ready, then let's continue to move forward on the planning, and let's wait a year to 2 years to see what happens with that. If it doesn't come up in, say, 3 years, then we've got to move forward. We're still shovel ready, we're still ready to move forward. And if we can't convince the taxpayers to put a full $20 million at a time, or 18 at that point, then the land that we're going to buy out of that 1 year money is still able to be resold. If it looks like the school's never going to come together over, for the next 10 years or so, we can always sell that land and give that back. That was the intent, was to get the land, get the engineering, then let's wait a year, 2 years, 3 years at the most, and see what happens with the school aid, Because the committee really believes, and the people that we've talked to, the people that have come and talked to us, that will at some point come back.
So, Rob,
But if the school's not shovel ready, if you don't have the land and the engineering designs and all those designs ready, you can't even apply for state aid. You have to have that part ready to apply for state aid.
my question would be though, has the school board firmly said that they will not bring the construction bond forward until there is state aid? Are we speculating that's their position, or have they taken a position on that?
We have given that as a recommendation, that we sit and wait and see what happens with the state aid. They have accepted our recommendation. That's all I can tell you about the school board. They have accepted our recommendation on this whole process, so that we make sure that we've got time to do it right for the taxpayer, the community, the kids, for everybody. And we don't want to just jump into something and not have it done right. The school aid's going to be important, and we think it's gonna come back, so we need to wait and see what happens with it. And the school board is saying, yeah, we're accepting your recommendation, and that's what we recommended.
And that's
Are
what
you
they
saying
voted
that they're gonna just go ahead and do what they want to if we give them the money?
I don't know, until there's a vote. I've learned over the years, until there's a vote. Yeah.
So to the school board, I mean, your committee, Ralph, did y'all say on 3 years, we need to build a school regardless, whether it's school aid or not? We've got to, before this building, the one now.
We suggested we wait, we get this first part ready to go, we're shovel ready, we're ready to move. Then give it 3 years.
And then after 3 years,
And then after 3 years, if we don't get the building aid, then we can go and try to get to school. But if we get defeated at that time, you're never gonna get a Lakeway. You're stuck with what you got,
yeah, no.
until it falls in on the kids. I'm
Hey,
dead
no, I
serious.
know, we will.
I'm dead serious.
will.
I've seen those structures up there.
We'll be taking kids to the
We're
hospital.
gonna take them to the morgue, the way we're going right now.
So in 3 years or so, the question is not when we build it, but how we fund it. We're going to build a school within 3 years.
The
and it's just
the
how we
committee
fund it.
recommends that we give it a 3-year period. If we don't get the school aid by a 3-year period, if we can't get into it,
Then we break ground.
then we're gonna break ground. We're not gonna break ground. We're gonna go to the town and ask for a full $20 million.
Right.
So in the plan then, 2019 is the year to acquire the land.
Right.
And 2020 and 2021 would only proceed if schooling aid had come back.
If the school aid comes back. And we went out as far as 2023 before we make any, if the school aid comes back, we will get in there that year for a bond. If the school aid doesn't come back, then we will wait until 2023, and then we'll go forward with a bond to build a new school.
Through 2022, 2023 would be the year that you would consider funding
It-
without school aid.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where we talked about, that's what we put in the newspapers. That's what you'll read in the newspapers, because that's what we've talked about, and Justin's reported on it, and those are the dates that we're kind of looking at.
All of 19, all of 20, all of 21, all of 22, 4 full years. I hope the building doesn't collapse by then.
And even when we do go for a
4
final
full
bond,
years.
we're still talking a year or two out before we even start construction if we get a final bond going. It's not, you're not gonna start construction right away.
So it could be 5 or 6 years before a new school is open.
If we went for a full bond this year, it's still gonna be 4 years before we have a school in place to open up. If we went for the full bond this year, it could be up to 4 years before we have a bond, of the school in place.
2 years to build.
Land preparation, roads, making sure we got water pressure up there, making sure we got all that available, which is hopefully, we're gonna come out with most of that in the design. The engineering design is supposed to come up with most of that. But we're not talking about it's not gonna happen overnight, no matter what we do. It's not gonna happen overnight.
True.
Even if we went for a bond, a full 20-year bond in 2019, we're still 4 years away from moving into a new school.
Gracious.
Good. Yeah.
Question, regarding bonds, is there the shortest term? Well, what's the shortest term you can take one out for? 5
Well,
years?
it depends on where you go.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone to the bank and gotten a 5-year
Yeah,
bond before.
okay.
Um,
And I guess what I'm thinking is, so even if you got a check for 900,000 next March, I mean, there's the whole land acquisition, so there's several months. Then even if you signed with an architect and engineer, there's gonna be probably a year or two just getting things on paper before you even hand it to a contractor. So when you say shovel ready, I think it's really a year behind when you get the check, if not 18 months. So now you're 19, 20, you're almost on to 21 before you're got everything ready for a piece of equipment to move in. Not to mention water and sewer. So I'm thinking you got a little bit more time than on the planning side of things. And that's why I asked about the shorter bond, because even if you got a check at for $900,000, it's still going to be a few years before you expend the full $900,000. Just my thought.
And you might be able to get a construction bond. We've done that before, where, you know, you're in process of building everything and you pull off what you need, And that actually prolongs when the payment starts, because if you don't pull it off until everything off till the next year, you won't have a payment actually till, you'll have interest payments, but you won't have a payment until that following year. So there's a couple different ways of doing that. I could see, and this is just my opinion, please, a warrant article passing with 900,000, with the school board withdrawing the 300,000 from that fund, if they can, and using 150,000 of their undesignated fund balance that they kept last year. So that pays 450,000 toward the 900,000. And then asking the taxpayers to foot that other 450,000 all at once.
$100.
I could see that
For 1
one
year.
passing
Boom.
Yeah.
for 1 year.
That could
Diane,
be,
maybe you should talk to Tom.
that's palatable.
I really think the $900,000 all at once, when taxpayers say, okay, $1.10 to my $1,000 of value, I have a $200,000 home, I don't know if I really can
That's
do
terrible.
that.
For
And
$100, $8 a month.
So why don't you run that concept by Tom Mangles?
I can,
It makes sense. I mean,
But, you know, even if
That's-
you get 900,000.
that's what my recommendation would be, but I'm not
Well, who's the
the
proper
school
person?
board.
Should we talk to the Ann,
Steve.
or do we
I
talk to
think
Steve?
Steve Niles would be the one that,
Okay.
Yeah, I think Steve.
Do we want to make that recommendation?
Yeah.
I'll propose that. I make a proposal.
Let's get it.
Let's get it down in words. Use your words, don't be
Okay.
like me.
Okay. We're talking 300,000 from the
Reserve.
UJ Allen Reserve
Yeah.
Fund?
trust fund.
Trust fund. Is there water over there?
if they can use
Yeah.
that, I can't.
Okay, yeah, I know.
And then use their 150,000 that they kept as undesignated fund balance. That would give them 450,000 toward the 900,000. They still have to say they're gonna raise and appropriate 900,000.
But as we do, say that offsetting funds.
And then the other 450,000 is gonna come from the taxpayers. So if $1.10 was on the 900,000,
Yeah.
you're looking at 55 cents.
I actually had verified with Jamie Dow a couple years ago about if that could be used, that fund could be used for bond payments, and she said it was written so well, yes, it can. But I'm sure that they would have to verify that again, so.
Problem is using it for a different school. Using it for Lakewood, not for,
But no, it wouldn't be used for Lakeway. You would just take out of your budget, proposed budget, you would use to make the bond payment for
no, the money
current
you're taking on, oh, I see.
Yeah,
So that you can reduce your other expenses, actually.
yeah.
Okay, so are you authoring that amendment, that motion?
He did,
We-
right?
Mel did.
Yeah, one of us can.
You
Okay.
can, Mel
I'm so move.
Okay, so the motion made by Mel and seconded by
I'll second it.
Ralph, okay, is to suggest to the school that they use $300,000 out of the UJ Gallon Trust Fund to offset the current bond payment on the vocational center, and that they use $150,000 out of their undesignated fund balance. And by doing so, that they would be able to then reduce the ask to the taxpayer. The ask would still be $900,000, but stating in that article that there would be $450,000 of funds that would be used to offset that increase.
And if we can do that, the question is, can it be pulled out of that trust fund? And you think it can?
For a bond payment, but I'm saying to apply it toward this 900,000.
Right.
I don't know if it can be done that
Directly,
way,
no,
directly,
yeah.
but I know it can be taken out of, offset.
Yeah.
Their bond payment for this.
Yeah. So the money that's in the budget for the bond payment can then get freed up, or 300,000 of it can get freed up
For their bond, I have no idea.
to be able to be used against.
The 900,000.
But it
So
would
how
be-
much the bond payment is for
I don't know, I think it's around 300,000, but it could be, it might be just, we'd have to verify that. But I know it's only for the Career and Technical Center, so it wouldn't apply to another facility.
Okay.
But that would reduce the proposed budget
So they would need to then add that to the proposed budget as
Revenue.
money.
As revenue.
And having it
Yeah.
come from it too, yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, it might complicate things because actually what they're gonna ask the taxpayer for, they're gonna reduce their budget by 300,000 and ask the taxpayers for this amount to be
You're gonna have to have an expenditure.
7,500 on this end. So it would have to be explained right out what they
It
did.
really would, yes, but at least if they can bring down the proposed budget
But they-
significantly, it would
The
help.
bottom line would be though that they would still be asking for a $900,000 bond, but as we have in bonds, mentioned in that bond that there will be $450,000 of other funds to be applied against it, so the taxpayer.
Well, I don't know if you can even say
No.
that because it isn't, you're not applying it directly to.
You can always say 150.
Yeah.
You can always say 150.
Yeah.
Because that comes out of the budget.
Yeah.
It's not the 300,000 that comes out of the budget, it's the 150 that would come out of the budget. But why would it come out of the budget?
Because we're making bond payments right now in the Career and Technical Center, so you can offset that by pulling money out of the reserve account. We can't use the Career and Technical Center monies for another facility.
The 300 comes out of the budget, the 150 comes out of that
Yeah.
article.
And so in essence, you'd add 300,000 to the proposed budget of the school, and that would be earmarked for this payment, right? Because you're offsetting, you've got the debt that's coming out, you're offsetting that with the fund, but then you still need to come up with that 300 to pay down towards this, so you have to add the 300 to the proposed to then come out to go
I'd
toward.
ask them to go to legal and Jamie Dow to figure out how it needed to be written.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
I think there's something, it takes some explaining, but I think it could be
It
done.
could help. If you could level fund or even less than fund your proposed budget and letting the taxpayers know that is the reason why they're doing it, is so they can have this other warrant article for the land acquisition and the engineering. I think people will accept that. I really do. Especially if you're gonna offset it even more by 150,000. So I think it's eases us into it
As a one-time payment.
as a one-time payment.
And if they can't do that, the next option is,
Bonding.
and I would suggest 3 years, 300,000 a year for 3 years, plus interest. Not go 10 years or 20 years. Get it done and over when you're ready to do the shovel ready. That will be paid off.
Rudy, you have something you would like to contribute?
Yes, as a taxpayer, I'm speaking about, do you think the article that's in the paper, it misleaded the taxpayer a little time? Because when I've been here over here, it's a bunch of BS, okay? According to what the article said in the newspaper, you guys better buy the newspaper and learn something about. They say that the only reason, right, they want to make this town $1 billion a town is because eventually the $20 million for the school is going to come out from the town. It's right in the article. Yeah, you can read English.
I know they want to increase the assessment to $1 billion.
That's what I'm talking about. When we reach that $1 billion, that doesn't mean we don't have to ask money to nobody. The town provided the $20 million for the school to build whatever they gotta build, according to, to the newspaper.
Well, the $1 billion assessment goal is quite good, but there's
What's
no,
$20 million of $1 billion?
there's no guarantee of
Peanuts.
that we can make that.
Well,
This
yes,
has-
we do, we will.
This has to be kind of several approaches to covering the cost of the
We,
school.
we will reach that $1 billion as a taxpayer because, you know, in 2 years, eventually you guys are going to reassess the property again, all right?
Yeah, but they're not talking about increasing the value of the existing properties to $1 billion.
Yes.
No. They're talking about adding to our tax base so we have more
And where our
taxable.
tax go to the town, right? The
Yeah,
tax
but we're
again.
talking about new entities paying more taxes. We're not talking about existing taxpayers
No,
paying more
no,
taxes.
no. You say it takes about 2 years before you build the school. 3 years.
No, but I mean, obviously, any of us who were there at the presentation, okay, the presentation, I mean, we already know.
According to Brian Ward, if you read what he said over there, the only way we can afford the $20 million is by raising the taxes.
That is a way, Rudy. It's
A
not,
way,
it's
a
not
way.
the only way.
No, but that's the way.
No.
This is the way.
No, but the point, and maybe, you know, obviously, articles, I mean, to get the
Correct
full-
me if I'm wrong, because you're the
No,
boss.
no. Okay, we know that the school project is going to ask the existing taxpayers to pay more for the new school. Okay, that's a given, but the point of this was not to ask them to pay the whole thing. If we can grow our tax base by 20% or 25%,
Yeah.
up to that $1 billion mark, then you will have new taxpayers, new entities, the industrial park being certainly one of them, that will be
And
contributing to it.
That's right, you can build the school.
That's right.
You can
But
go to
the
the
whole
school.
point of
Okay.
increasing the tax base, Rudy, is to get new people to pay a share of the burden and not asking the existing taxpayers.
Dear Chairman, we gotta stop with this taxation up. You understand
But it's
that?
not taxation without representation.
It is. It will be representation when it's gonna come up with the $20 million and give it to the school.
Okay.
And build the school. But keep in mind that, because you know, everything that's written in the paper, you guys
Wow.
try to deviate left and right, you know?
If that's,
You was like,
if
you
you
know.
can take that one thought, I mean, we're talking about new tax valuation. We're not talking about increasing the value of the current taxpayers. That's in that article, that's the point.
So
Okay.
my second recommendation would be to do the 900,000 on a 3-year loan or bond. It would have to be called a bond because it's over $100,000. And that would cost the taxpayers between 38 cents to 40 cents per thousand per year, which is a little bit better than paying it all up front. Still would get it done before the $20 million project.
Before the shovel goes in the ground.
Yeah,
And you still could apply some of those other
you could,
strategies
yeah.
to it.
Okay. So anyway, we have a motion though, made and seconded. Obviously, the wording of the implementation would require, so I mean, this is a sentiment that we're asking the school to look at.
Yes.
Because some of the actual wording and how the funds actually go may not be able to go directly as we might be thinking, but the end effect would be to allow them to offset half the actual cost of that bond, okay?
Thank you.
Is
Yes.
that, we feel comfortable with saying
I
that?
mean, I'm just picking up, that's what I think we should do.
Okay.
Because that would cut, that.
If the money's there and we can get
We should
all
use
of it, then yes, it should be used
Okay.
for it instead of just sitting in the bank drawing interest.
Okay, so that's been a motion made and seconded, and I know it's not the clearest motion in term, which is difficult because we don't know the exact legal
That's right.
wording, but we understand that there are funds that are available to be used, that the net effect of it could be to reduce the actual cost to the taxpayer by
Yes.
half if they were to decide to go.
The bond, that short.
No, to go
Move
as
the question, he
a
says.
1 year.
You're complicating it. You move the question.
Okay. If no further discussion, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Now, is there going to be based on Karen's second recommendation,
So moved.
Do we want to make a second alternative motion
Option.
to, option to the school? Would be to do a 3-year
3-year
bond.
bond.
Regardless of whether or not they accept the first proposition?
Well, if they accept the first one, they wouldn't have to put this one on.
Because we do it just one time, boom,
Yeah.
$100.
Okay.
But this would be if the board,
Just a
the
straight 900,000.
school board doesn't agree to that,
Yeah.
and they want to do it a different way,
Or
here's the
for
second
some
one.
reason they can't access that money.
Yeah.
I'd like to see them still try to use any unexpended funds on the second option too.
Say that again, Jim.
Any unexpended funds, like this year, next year, that they can use that to apply to option 2, just like option 1.
Okay. So the second motion made by Diane and seconded by Michael?
With a V.
I still have a concern on that with the fact that the first one only requires a 50% vote.
Right,
The second one's gonna require that 60% vote.
Yeah.
correct.
Well, we're just giving this as a second option. We're gonna make 2 recommendations to the school.
To the school board, and
Right.
they're gonna decide which way they wanna go. Because I just have an issue with making anything for the school board, dealing with the new school, to have to come up with a 60% vote. Because that's
Although-
always tough.
Yeah, it is, other than
always tough.
ultimately, you know you're gonna have to get it, because you're never gonna be able to build a school without it. So I know it's a two-edged sword, but to some degree, being successful, if this were to go as a 3-year bond and you get the 60%, that would be a good indicator of the potential success for the second.
And if you don't get it, then you're dead in the water.
Ralph,
You're
I
dead in the
feel
water
like-
for another year.
Yeah.
Right, but
I
as
understand.
Steve just said, it could be the opposite.
It could be
When
the
it comes
opposite.
time.
It could go
when-
either
when
direction.
the
With a
school
60%
says,
vote,
We
with a,
want 20 million.
I know.
You're gonna need
but with a
60% anyway.
With a 60% vote, it could go either way. With a 50% vote, we pretty much got a chance we can get it in.
You know,
Doesn't mean the
Without
school,
a
doesn't mean
bond,
the school's
without a
getting
bond.
built.
well,
No, it doesn't, but it means that we can at least get that first step passed and move forward.
Well, the school should have been thinking about this for the last 10 years, trying to come up with this money.
But they didn't,
And
and
they
we still
haven't.
have to deal with it.
We're still gonna deal with a
So
school
we're
that's
trying to
gonna
come
fall
up with
down
an
and kill our
It's an
kids.
option. The school board doesn't have to listen to us.
No, you're right.
And they
You're right, but I'm
and-
still,
And they
I'm just-
gladly tell us
I
that.
understand.
They do
I
every
understand.
minute.
They tell us every time.
Okay, let's go with the vote, I just
It's
don't
an
like
option.
60%.
And Ralph, I have always felt that 60%, I know 60% is a hard time. And I take kind of a comment that Ed said at the last meeting. I have been thinking about that this time the information is out there more for the taxpayers. And it kind of, I went back to think about why maybe some of the previous efforts have failed. And it's not so much, I don't think that there wasn't enough information out there. I think it was just too much. Going on that, because we brought 2 buildings together, which would probably equal what we're gonna be asking for this time, just 900,000 straight out of the chute. I think it's just as risky to try to bring forward a $900,000 request and the impact it has on the taxpayers as it is to bond and have a 60% vote. I don't know which one I would
the
pick
prairie
if
vote.
I was
The
on the school board.
60% vote or the $200 hit.
Yeah, so I don't know which one is more risky. And I'm going back and thinking that some of the efforts that we worked so hard for in the past, it was because there was too much to the taxpayer that year. It wasn't because there wasn't enough information out there or anything else.
It wasn't because it wasn't a good idea.
And it wasn't a good idea. It was because it was too much of a hit. So I think I don't know which way I would go, actually.
It's obviously it's 2 different strategies, but I guess,
It just,
it's not a slam dunk.
it just bothers me because if we get 59%, we just all go home and it's done. It's history, we get nothing that year.
But the
Start all
building,
over
the
again.
building we're sitting in, Ralph, got 59%.
It took us
But I
a
see
couple
Diane's
years.
point where I can see a lot of people saying, I can't take $100 hit.
Or $200 hit.
Or $200, $300 hit.
Yeah.
But the first, I mean, I certainly think the first recommendation is a sure thing.
Yeah.
But I agree with Ralph, I mean, 60% is tough. I mean,
It's
we're on the
tough.
project for 3 years, it got 59.5.
But if it's just 900,000, I think it's gonna be hard. This first recommendation, if they take it, they may not take it, but if they take it, I think it has a better chance.
And Ralph, before Senate Bill 2, it used to be 66 2/3.
I know it was.
They
I know
gotta
it
communicate that
I know it was.
the first one is our overwhelming number one choice. Make it clear that that's really what we think they should do.
Is it? Is it our number one choice? I mean,
Let's
I don't
incorporate
want
that
to
one.
put words in Ralph's mouth here.
I don't think we
So,
voted.
Well, we could
do you
vote
want
on
it?
the second one.
Yeah, we haven't had votes on the second one.
I think the first one's a great choice. I think that's a great way to go. I think the taxpayers and hopefully the school board can look at that and say, yes, let's do that.
Okay, that's,
Okay, so
Okay.
we have this, the second motion is to recommend as a second choice to the first, right? Okay, we say, phrase it that way, we feel comfortable.
Okay.
Well, I guess at first, okay, I don't want to get ahead of it here. Show of hands, as they've been explained, who would favor the first motion that we've already agreed on, 8-0? Who would prefer that to the second motion that we're about to discuss or about to vote on? Who would prefer the 300,000, the 150,000, and the $450,000 segmentation, if you would, of the $900,000?
oh,
Oh, yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If all the other
This is
stuff
just-
aligns.
Yes.
Yeah.
so
Okay.
just had to take a vote.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So 2, 3, 4,
I'm guessing 6.
6.
Yeah.
And all those who would prefer 2, which we have actually not yet voted on.
As
The
the
3-year
as the number
bond.
one.
Yeah. Okay, so that's 6, none against, and 2 abstentions. Okay, so then we will take a vote on the 900,000 3-year bond proposal. Who would support that as a second choice to the one that we've already proposed and approved?
Aye.
Okay, that's Ralph, against?
Against. I'm going to say against.
Okay, so 7-1, that's approved. But as a second choice, as Ed said. As a,
But because we voted on it, I will go along with the committee. Whenever we vote on something, I'm with the committee.
yeah, well, hopefully, Ralph, you
No
sense
problem.
here that nobody's here has an ulterior motive trying to kill this thing. You know, everybody's trying, we're trying to figure out the best way to make
To
it
move forward
happen.
with it, yep.
Because we all, I mean, obviously, we, as a committee, voted to support your committee's recommendation to the school. You know, the sentiment of it, the good intentions. Now the question is, how do we pay for it, and how do we get the taxpayers to?
To go along with it, yep. Okay.
Okay.
And I can just say the select board had a work session this afternoon, and they didn't have this creative proposal before them, but they made a motion, and they basically had a statement saying, you know, in a collaborative effort to work with the school and try to put this forward, that they wanted to recommend to the school to go after a bond versus adding for the entire amount on a warrant article. With that said, with this other alternative, you know, they may prefer that over, you know, just as you guys have bonding, so.
And I think it all depends on whether we can use that money or not, so.
They did support bonding today
Yeah.
in their meeting.
And obviously, that's what you conveyed at the last meeting, at least from.
But they took an official vote.
The
this
official
time,
vote,
yeah.
that's right. And like Diane says, until the vote's taken.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Yep. I've
Okay.
been burned by that a couple of times.
Okay, so hopefully we all feel comfortable with this. I mean, I'd say, rolling back our last meeting, I didn't want to have that end on a sour note, because I want to make sure that we all feel comfortable about what we're moving ahead with and the whys, not just what we're proposing, but why we're proposing it and how. Okay,
Both are good.
good, okay.
All right, you're on.
I want to go back, one more question over the last meeting we had there at the school. What exactly is the definition of level funding? I know that's come up a number of times. What exactly is the definition of level funding? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, and the reason you're asking is because obviously, there's a couple of different definitions or ways that that could roll out. I mean, on the school side, Ralph, you can, and on the town side for that matter too, you can level fund the budget. In other words, we spent $10 million last year, we're gonna spend $10 million this
Okay,
year.
that's what I thought.
Right, but on both the town and school side, depending on what surplus you end up with and how the surplus is used,
I forgot to do that.
whether it's just held or it's used to apply against taxes, that can, so your tax bill may not end up being level, because but the budget could be level funded, but how it actually presents itself at the end of the
So
year.
basically, when you mentioned at the school board the other day, you were saying that we recommend you level fund. You're telling them to come up with a budget equal to last
I
year's.
said budget, and then the second thing I asked, and I should have said, was to target the same surplus, because if you lower the budget and you don't target the same surplus, then you don't have a level
Right.
budget.
But we have never discussed level funding with the town budget. And last year, they had $500,000 in that reserve that they didn't give back. Wasn't it 500,000?
Yeah, but the 500,000.
That you didn't give back for tax purposes.
Yeah, right, but the 500,000, Ralph, that is our operating surplus, and that's our checkbook balance. Karen can express this better than I can, but basically that's how we cash flow ourselves through the year. We can't start the year
But
with
doesn't
$0.
the school do the same thing? If they give you back their surplus, they don't have that checkbook to run the year?
Karen can explain the timing of that better.
The unreserved fund balance that the school has is monies beyond, that they have left after all of their expenditures and their revenues. Now, they may have received more revenues than expenditures. That extra money in the past had always been given back to the taxpayers as a reduction on their school tax rate. They call it to giving it back to the town. It's not. It's reducing the amount that they expect the town to pay in the next year toward the taxes.
All right.
Okay? Our fund balance is made up of many, many years of whatever's left of the revenues, whatever's left of the that we didn't expend, go into this small amount of money, and that money covers us from time frames where we're not getting in tax money. And it is called unreserved fund balance. It's right around 500,000. Pieces of that are set aside for specific things that we may have prepaid or we might have encumbered. In other words, this year, we just encumbered, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, 25,000 for the fire truck. It was actually 500,000, but 475 is coming from a grant. So 25,000 has been set aside because it was on a warrant article. So that's part of that encumbrance. It's holding that money so that we're not expending it on something else that we should be.
Okay, so your unreserved fund of 500,000, you don't actually have 500,000 available because a lot of it's already earmarked for something.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Now, the 500,000 is also made up some of the receivables. So if we have some receivables out there, that is part of that accounting piece.
As in the tax bill has been.
That's in the tax bill.
So it's, okay.
So the 500,000 is a little bit of a cushion to the town, so we're not going after TANs. When we bill, we start the year January 1st, we bill out in June, most years. From January 1st till June, we're running on some of that fund balance and it dwindles down very quickly. And then June, if we need a TAN, we ask the selectmen to approve a TAN.
A TAN is a tax
TAN,
anticipation,
right.
which
Yes.
is like.
Yeah, I've known that, yeah.
So if we need it, which I try everything we can, work with the schools so we don't need to take a TAN because it costs interest. Interest was low at one time, it's starting to come back up. We'll go through and keep working off that bill money we're getting in June and July till the next bills go out. and carry us through to the end of the year. Our budget is from January 1st all the way through. So that 500,000 is made up of all of those little things put together that helps pull us through.
Okay.
It can be used to offset the tax rate. It can be used. The selectmen have the right to use it. When you get down to 500,000, you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation where one accounts payable run can cost you over 500,000 in the town, because you have the school payment going out. That's about 400,000 to 500,000. One of those payments going out, if the school didn't work with us, we would have to take more TAMs. We would have to go borrow more
The
money.
DRA actually recommends a lot more
Yes.
than what we're handling. I also want to just quickly add to what you were just asking. So you were talking about unexpended fund balance at the end of the year for the school. The school also has $700,000 in reserve accounts that they can tap into if there's for special education, for fuel, for maintenance, for the career and technical. So that's within their reach. They just have to tap into it. They don't even need a vote from the voters. They have the authority to go.
That's not part of that unreserved balance
No.
at the end of the
No,
year?
no, that isn't.
No, okay.
Those are all separate.
So-
Okay, so they've got their fund to be able to operate with.
Yes.
The money that you're talking about, when you ask them to return that, is just leftover extra money
Right.
for on the school side,
Well, we asked them to return at the end of the year, yes.
at the end of the year,
Yes.
okay.
That's
All right,
Yeah, that's-
it makes a little more sense.
And I think we only have about 50,000 in capital reserves that we can't tap into unless there's a town meeting vote to allow us to expend that, unless they've been specified that the selectmen or the Recreation Commission can tap into those monies. And there's very little. We have not had large trust funds or capital reserves for years.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
So,
go,
I have good news.
good.
Good news. Today, the selectmen talked with us about the different votes. And the first thing I'd like you to look at is this new couple-page budget handout that I gave you.
As long as you read all the notes on.
Yeah. I'm going to refer you to the other general government. It says page 1 of 1, but it's where the cemeteries are, the advertising, other general government. If you note where the airport is, which is line 9 on that, you'll see that the selectmen on the proposed budget removed it from the budget as you asked and put it on a warrant article. So they did what you asked your last meeting. So that reduced the proposed budget by $6,000. The next thing that we talked about, I went through with all the departments trying to see where we're going to be at the end of the year. The highway department has had some staff that were out because of illness or sickness, and some were upwards 5 and 6 months that they were out. So they had a little bit of savings in their budget. And I asked the selectmen today if they would allow me to pay the highway truck. It had 1 more year on it. It would be paid off in 2019, to pay the 2019 payment in 2018. This is a lease. I normally couldn't do it with a loan, but I can do it with the lease, pay it off, and get that out of the proposed budget and the default budget for 2019. So a total budget cut of $39,000 was taken out today. So if you look at your summary sheet, page 2 of 2, on the very bottom line, total budget, the default budget is now $107,615. It's a 1.18% increase from 2018's approved budget. The proposed budget now is 2.82%. It's $257,997 above the 2018 approved budget. So it's less than 3%. Those two items change that much. And then if you look below, I've broken down because we have to break out the transfer station, opera house, and parking meter. I broke those all out so you can see what those are for expense figures on this budget sheet. And going to the warrant articles and their votes. One, two.
Don't let me forget to ask you about the Parks and Recs, 6,000, okay?
Okay. And you and me, there's some passed down that way.
And just a quick question on the highway truck, on paying that off. Was there, when you go back next year to the default, what will the value be in that line?
There won't be anything. It's paid off.
So-
Zero.
Okay.
It's
So
zero
it'll
in the
be-
default this year, it's zero in the proposed this year, it'll be zero in next year's default.
Okay.
It's
So
gone.
with the new legislation, this.
You don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
The truck that's on the warrant article, you will. Okay. So the selectmen voted today, if you look at number 2 on the section above the total proposed budget and warrant articles. So you're looking at line 2, sub 2, WWCS. They voted 3-0 to support that warrant article. The sub-area 2 wastewater and stormwater project. For the CWSRF, for waste management or waste treatment plant management and planning, they voted 3-0 to support that. The 2019 proposed budget with the adjusted number in it, they voted 3-0. The transfer station operating budget, the opera house and the parking meter, 3-0 to support those budgets. The ASME contract and the SCA, we have no figures on. Dog licenses, they supported that, 3-0. Road repairs, 3-0. Public Works truck, 3-0. Opera House heating exchange and boiler, 3-0. Opera House continued improvements, 3-0. Transfer station, repair, replacement equipment buildings, 3-0. Transfer station auger pre-crusher, 3-0. Dog park was 3-0. The Parks and Recreation playground equipment was 3-0. Conservation Commission, unexpended Conservation Commission funds, 3-0. Partridge Lake Associate, whoop, I missed. Parking lot reconstruction maintenance was 3-0. Partridge Lake Association CWSRF grant, 3-0. On town, purchase map lot barn, pending negotiations, was 2-1. 2 for it and support, 1 against.
That's the
Town-
one in the parking lot up behind the Jack's Junior Theater.
That's correct.
Town office safety improvements. This is to improve the safety of our office and administrative office, 3-0. Mount Washington Regional Airport, it's moved out on the warrant article like you wanted, 3-0 to support it. Police Department Expendable Trust Fund,
Karen, that says 1 abstain.
that was from the Budget Committee. If you look up above BC,
Okay, got it.
It's not Boston College. I can understand why.
Police Department Expendable Trust Fund is 3-0. In adjustment to the parking enhancement loan, we talked to them about, the Budget Committee wanted it removed. They want to keep it on the warrant and allow the taxpayers to make a choice to put that into the budget. So it will be as a warrant article in 2019, become part of the proposed default budget thereafter until it's paid off.
If it passes.
If it passes. 3-0. The one that you have not seen yet is an unexpended welfare balance. Right now, we have about $11,000 left in our welfare budget. We've had a huge influx of people this year. There is monies left. We do have a trust fund set up, and she did reduce the 2019 proposed budget for welfare. She'd like to put this $8,000 in there just in case there is a need to dig into the trust fund. So this is offsetting by the balance that's left of the budget. So it's a 3-0 support of the selectmen. The both chamber warrant articles passed with a 3-0 vote. All of the outside petition social service warrant articles except for Caleb caregivers passed with 3-0 for it. Caleb caregivers, they voted 0 yes, 3 no, because nothing was received on that. There is a new petition warrant article. It doesn't cost the taxpayers anything, from my understanding. It's on renewable energy, and they voted 3-0 to support that.
And will you tell us about that? Because we have to vote on it too, right?
It's all worded warrant article. I haven't even seen the warrant article yet. I did not see it.
So could we vote on that the next time we meet?
Don't see any reason why you couldn't.
But there is no tax impact, right?
No tax impact, my understanding.
But we haven't verified that yet, so.
Karen, so Caleb won't have any warrant article at all?
They will if they submit it. They still have not submitted a petition warrant article. They have until January 8th to submit one.
Right, it would just say on the warrant article that Board of Selectmen voted.
0 again, or 3 against.
Right,
Yeah.
it just goes on the warrant article, their vote, just like ours does.
They felt they had time to get things in, and nothing's been received, and our secretary has called them several times and not getting anybody to talk to.
So if it doesn't come in, you just remove this.
It will be taken off.
Same thing with human services.
We have received a petition. It lacked a couple signatures. They have until January 8th to get those signatures in.
It had the signatures, but they were contested by the supervisors of checklist. So they're the ones who determine.
When they're not voted yet.
So they need to
I
protect
did
it.
talk to Nathan Crow, right?
Yeah.
It's Nathan.
At the chamber?
Yes.
Okay.
Today, I met with him earlier today just to convey our concerns about, keeping track of the funding. And he assured me that he would keep track of the funding and submit it to the town. And then I said, like urban sprawl, we kind of are objecting to project sprawl under the guise of beautification efforts. Because it was, I expressed to him that sometimes when things are donated, and then all of a sudden it becomes the responsibility of the taxpayers to fund it, that to keep that in mind, and he said he would for future projects. So it was a very good conversation, and I really feel like, he's new on board and he will definitely keep us in mind, and he appreciates your support.
Karen, shouldn't you remove those votes
Where it's
on the default?
on the default.
Yeah, we didn't vote on those.
Well, the 7-0
Look, they're all down below.
on,
They're all in the next
Default,
section.
but not proposed.
oh, okay. Yeah, they could come out of there. They could come out of there. So I guess I'm looking for an approval on the airport that's now, I feel like you voted on that, to put that out there already, 7-0.
We voted.
I have that you voted against the parking enhancement loan, you voted to remove it, but I'm not sure if that is a vote in support or
Of the
not
new,
support.
of the new format. Okay,
Yeah.
so, anyway, so on the airport, so the question there would be, we supported moving it out of the budget, now the question is, do we support it as a warrant article?
Yes.
So we, yeah,
One question, I
Well,
just,
they put it back in the budget, right?
No, they
No,
took
they
it out of the
removed it.
budget because of your
Oh, it's a.
recommendation.
But it hasn't been put in here yet. Oh, yeah. it's a
Yes, it
warrant
is.
article. Okay, warrant article, right.
there was one,
So we didn't,
We didn't vote on the warrant article, per
You
se,
just-
whether we
Right.
support it, because we didn't know we had it as an
Right.
option.
That's right.
so that we need to do, so is there discussion on supporting the money for the airport as in its new warrant article form?
I have a question first.
Yes,
May I?
okay.
This says one abstention on the airport,
That was to move it out of the budget.
and I voted no, so maybe that was my no vote.
I might have
So-
taken that as an abstention. I am sorry if I did.
Well, I'm deeply offended.
Not too deep for you.
So that has to be changed right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so, is there a motion to support the airport article as a separate warrant article
I
first?
will move it and someone will second it, and then when you vote, you can vote no, but it's hard to do it the opposite
That's right.
way. So I will make the motion to support them.
Support the article, and who's seconded by? Ed. Okay, Karen, you keep, you got
I'm
that?
trying to.
Okay, made by Diane, seconded by Ed. Okay, discussion on supporting the town contributing $6,000 to the airport, White Mountain Regional Airport Authority, or something like that.
In the
We
form of
probably
a warrant
discussed it so
article.
much.
In the
So
form
this,
of-
yeah, this would be a vote to, what it's gonna show on the ballot, basically. Do you
What,
support?
we're voting to whether to support the warrant article or not support it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. I call a vote.
Yeah.
There's no
No,
discussion.
no discussion. So all those in favor of supporting the article for the town of Littleton to pay $6,000 for support of the White Mountain Regional Airport, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
no.
And I have hands. The ayes, please. Aye.
3.
Three.
All against? Okay, so it's defeated 5-3. 3 in favor, 5 against.
Okay, great. The next one will be the adjustment to the parking enhancement loan. You voted to remove it from the warrant. The selectmen voted to keep it on there and voted to support it. And let the taxpayers make the decision.
As a
Was there
warrant
any
article?
additional?
As a warrant article.
Come to the selectmen that we
I guess I don't understand exactly what it is. Adjustment to parking enhancement loan.
Years ago,
2001.
there was a lease, 30-year lease to gain some property and do some development down behind the Green Street, behind the Bank of New Hampshire. In that area,
Behind the diner.
Okay.
okay? It was a $200,000 lease to own type purchase. It was costing us 7.5% interest. It was for about 30 years. In 2013, it got moved from that to a loan financed less than 4%, a 10-year loan. It's going to be paid off in, I thought we had it on there, but
3 more years or something.
4 more years. It's going to be paid off. It was financed for less than 4%, shorter term. The money that pays this comes out of the parking meter fund. The debt shows up in the parking meter fund, not on the town's debt schedule in the budget. So the taxpayers are not paying for this loan. The parking meter funds have been paying for this. And there's been a lot of question of why the other debt is all under the debt service other than sewer. And this is sitting out there under the parking meters, and the parking meter fund is not accumulating so it can improve parking.
Right. Or be available, to Andrew's point, as matching funds
Matching
under
funds
other.
Right, for things like purchasing the barn or negotiating with a property owner to fix a parking issue, say, on the other side of the river, or developing a parking area, I would say at South and River. It's just not there's a lack of funds available. The other story to this is the initial purchase was not actually really for parking. It was a creative way to help eliminate, I think, a number of blight that was bad. There was a lot of old derelict buildings out in the river district.
High on health comes to
Yeah, and this was a creative way to finance a matching amount that was needed for a pretty big project. I think it was really probably the first step in creating a cleaned up river district. And theoretically, we gained some parking out of it. I think it might be like 6 spaces, but the spaces are actually used by an ahead building that we can't really even access. It's actually in a head parking lot. And overall, something that had to happen, the voters wanted to happen. But what it's done is basically take any momentum out of the parking fund to actually do what it's there to do, which is to enhance or improve parking, to improve sidewalks. And what we've lost basically at this point, I think, is about $250,000, which we could have turned into, say, $1 million in grant money by leveraging it for, say, transportation alternative program. But by having this debt come out of this small fund, you're neutering it basically. You only have 4 more years. So, but at the same time, that's another
4 years is 4 years.
4 years. 4 years. That's $80,000.
But yeah, you had a different thought on it too when we discussed it last time, right?
Well, I just said if you increase your fees, you're gonna have excess revenue in there that you can do with what you want with it.
So the parking commission, which is really active right now, is in agreement with that saying. One of the difficult things is that there are proponents for both. So the same people who are going to say, you shouldn't touch these fees, you shouldn't touch these fines, you should go get your money out of the parking fund. So, both sides have this opposing argument. And I think the select board really just like, well, the voters decided to put this on through a warrant article.
On the third try, I think.
Yeah, on the third try. So, if they want to take it out, it's up to them. So there is a cost, because right now it is being paid for from those quarters you put in the thing.
Right,
So.
and so now it's out of the budget.
No, it is in the
Still
budget
in the budget. But
Until-
this will supplant it if it passes.
I will have to add to the warrant article saying that it will be removed from the parking lot budget and moved to the general fund budget, which that is why it's going to cost the taxpayers .028.
$23,000
2.3
just to
cents.
move this.
2.3 cents a year.
No,
Because it's gonna be paid out of the general fund. If they
It's-
do that, it's gonna be paid out of the
Yeah,
general
right
fund.
now it's paid out of the
Not
parking
out of the
meter
parking
fund.
Right.
It's not gonna cost to move it. Moving it will result in a cost.
It costs to
There's
the
no cost.
taxpayers.
Yeah,
So-
it's not a cost of moving it.
You're
It's not
basic-
like we're paying legal fees to move
Okay,
it.
but right now, if you just left it alone, nothing happens. But you're asking the taxpayers to fund $23,000 this year.
For 4 years. 23,000.
A year for 4 years?
For 4 years.
Because that's what we would normally pay.
Because it would normally come out of the budget. I mean,
It would normally come out of the parking.
fund, and this is just not paying Peter to Paul, it's just making sure Paul has the money to get matching funds if needed.
It's to help.
Parking is one of the difficult things right now. Parking is a huge issue, and it's just going to get worse. And if you look at our parking lots and most of the leases or arrangements we have, it's been our responsibility to maintain them. We've plowed them. We've occasionally painted lines when we can and cleared brush, but the lots themselves need, lighting, drainage, and really some engineering to really make it so we can increase parking. So we have a lot to accomplish, and we're not going to be coming immediately with a lot of new things, but I think that something to think about is, where is that money going to come from? Are we going to start saving for it now, or are we going to?
So if we saw an increase in the parking fees, and next year, if we just said, okay, this year we'll let you leverage funds or whatever, next year, if we saw that parking fees were really helping out and everything, we would still have to bring this back and the voters would have to vote on it again.
Not if it's part of a warrant article that says this will be included in the next year's default budget and every default budget until it's paid in full.
And that's 4 years.
And that's 4 years.
So in
As
effect,
separate debt service.
It will become part of our debt
That's what I
service.
mean, that's right.
so when we did this some years ago, we really did a capital purchase, but we were having the maintenance fund pay for it. And now we're just kind of getting the book straight.
Well,
But it takes some money to
if
get the book
the
straight.
voters approve it.
Yeah.
Well, you
Which
leverage-
was
you
one
leverage that
step
fund
better, Mel,
to get
than
the finance and
paying
do
the
that
high
project.
interest rate on the loan.
Do what?
Which was one step better than paying the high interest rate on
Right.
the
Oh,
loan
yeah.
lease purchase agreement.
Right, but now we see the advantage of having money to get matching funds and things like that. That this drains from your fund.
Right.
But don't you have other funds out there to draw matching funds from? So in other words, this 23,000 now will pretty much be, you can use it wherever and however you want to.
Has to be voted
Vote to
on.
be voted on. For example, if you look at, there's an article number, which one's the barn there?
The barn, yeah?
Yeah.
Uh,
22.
So number 22, so that's the one that we're in negotiations with right now. If you look, there's some offsetting funds there in the amount of $20,000. So those offsetting funds represent almost 100% of that fund. There's $23,000 in it right now, but this would use 20 of it to help with that.
But then you still got a cost to the taxpayers of $30,000.
That's the remaining amount, right? Because we don't have enough money in the fund to be able to do what we need to do.
All these little amounts build up, so there's 130,000 right there that could be taken out of here by just not, by taking these warrant articles right off here.
But
That
when
the
I'm-
taxpayers wouldn't have to pay for.
So, I mean, like the barn, for example, which you guys have already voted on, that one is, it's an opportunity that happens right now where we have a parking issue, and this is gonna help us start to build the square footage we need and the design that we need to increase the amount of parking spaces available for the downtown. And, I mean, the thing about that parking is it's used not just by the commercial businesses, but also a lot of residents in the area. Well, there's a really good parking plan that's gonna be, I mean, we're pretty close to having it out.
Yeah, it's in
You
draft
can put
form.
meters up there behind Jack's Jr.?
So some of the things that the group is looking at is difference between, say, like metering or potentially putting, like, having a
Parking permit.
kiosk or maybe even hang tags,
Okay.
and being able to offer to residents the ability to purchase, say, a year of night parking.
Thank you.
You know, there's a lot of benefits to a lot of things, a lot of that. Like, for example, if we have everyone's contact information with your lease and we need to clean out a parking lot, you can send out a massive message saying everybody needs to park. If you're usually assigned to this parking space at night, park over here. We're gonna clean the snow out, or we're doing improvements. So, anyways, it's a pretty in-depth study that these guys are doing.
Okay, is there
So moved.
a motion? Is there a second to the motion? Made by Diane, seconded by Jimmy. So all those in favor of supporting Article number
26.
26, adjustment to parking lot enhancement loan, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Can I have the aye hands, please? 6, okay, opposed hands? 6. In support. Okay.
Number 27, welfare unexpended welfare balance to put in, that's to put in that trust
Which we've
fund.
done this for
We
some years
have.
in a row now.
Yes.
It's just basically, she runs a tight ship. When they have some left over, we let her,
try to put
just
some-
like conservation commissions, let them hold it so that if something unexpected does happen, that we're prepared.
It helps her to keep a more level budget.
And I think maybe some years when it maybe got a little higher than it needed to, we actually took a drawdown as part of the operating budget, right?
That's right.
The amount in there right now is about $13,000 that's sitting there. But given, she did cut her budget and was hoping to be able to draw off that if she needed to.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Made by Ed, seconded by Diane.
So-
Any discussion?
Yeah, where's that $8,000? It's an offsetting fund. I don't understand it.
When there's extra funds left at the end
End
of the year,
year,
that would normally fall to fund balance. If we haven't expended it, it falls to fund balance. If the voters approve to use the leftover balance or some portion of that to put into a trust fund or a capital reserve fund, that money comes back out of the leftover balance or fund balance, what we call fund balance, undesignated fund balance, to use to offset that warrant article.
okay. What generally happens to the unused fund balance? I mean, you got a budget,
That's where the
you don't
500,000.
spend it, the difference goes away.
The 500,000, that's how that.
So that gets into the 500,000.
Yes,
Now you want to put 8,000 out of that 500,000, put it back into.
Instead of going to the 500,
right.
it would go into its own reserve.
Okay.
And we have done this in the past.
Yes, we do it with the Conservation Commission every year.
But that's for what, $100?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
Didn't we just vote to do that for the police?
$2,000.
And Ralph, it's really to kind of.
Didn't we just vote to
Welfare
sort of
is
do that
unpredictable, you
similar
know, we
thing
can't
for the
really
police department
budget.
trust
Yes.
It's just whatever cases come in, and if they meet qualifications by state law, then we have to pay.
Yeah.
So to be able to address that fluctuation.
The Conservation Commission has been as high as $2,000.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, our welfare
Actually-
officer is
Okay.
really superb. She really goes and she knows all the agencies and she utilizes all extra resources before she utilizes the town funds.
She's got tough love.
She does, oh my gosh.
Which is good.
Which, I mean, it shows if she has extra,
Yeah.
extra at the end of the year. It's just-
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of supporting Article 27, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Support 8-0.
Now, I don't know if you want to go back and talk about the proposed budget, or are you okay with the 7-0 vote that was last,
And would you reduce it by 39?
39,000?
Okay, does anybody feel the need to revisit that, or?
Can I just revisit something? Totally, I don't know how this needs to be handled. The $6,000 that was not paid to the town for services rendered by the rec department
For the school.
for the school, I'm not quite sure how this is handled. I think we gave the school funding for that at one time with the understanding that it was going to be paid to the town. It was kind of maybe, I don't know if it's just a,
I never see anything in writing.
yeah.
We are looking for minutes related to it. It started in 2008. It went from 2,000 to 6,000. And we've been 2 years where they've had the 6,000 in their budget that they should be paying, and we have had it as revenue. We have billed them and not been paid.
I think I was on the board when we decided to do this crazy, because I think there was an understanding that the school purchased certain amount of equipment and the town's people or the town did the mowing and everything else of that, and that the school would pay the town for the mowing. No matter what, I think because the rec department is doing the service, they should get paid for the service somehow. So I don't know how to make that a reality. And you're saying you're researching it, so you don't know if there's that understanding or not.
I have never seen anything in writing regarding the $6,000.
And that's what I mean about a vote.
So now the writing you'd like to see is on the bottom of the check.
I would love to see the bottom of the check. In fact, I asked today, but have not got a response.
But they had 4 years of doing that. I mean, you're talking about a period of time where they did transfer the money to the town for that. So there was an understanding at one time that that was what was to happen.
Well,
The
it
last
was-
2 years, they haven't done it.
Go from 2008 to 2018, they've had it in their budget for 10 years.
But they haven't paid it.
We have not got it for 2 years.
So,
Any reason why? I make a motion that we petition the school board to pay up. And remind them that we covered a $4 million budget, bond for them that came out of the town budget, not the school. You remember? So we'll trade them, they can keep the $4 million and we'll take the $1,600.
so I don't know how
You charge
to
them
do,
interest?
I don't know how to go retroactive and yet
I don't think we can.
perhaps, well, I think we can recommend that.
You're right.
I was told they have the money sitting there
So
waiting to pay us.
why
But
stall?
I was told it was not released, that we had to
Okay.
get an MOU
Okay,
in
so being
place.
an advisory board, would we like to take a vote advising the school that they should pay the two $6,000 payments outstanding
And continue.
and continue into the future?
If the Parks Department is going to do the,
Okay.
So, well.
doesn't that make sense?
Discussion, right?
Well,
Why
motion.
you need a motion?
So,
So moved.
What, you said they're holding off, waiting for an MOU?
An MOU about the plowing,
The snow plane.
Oh, that's it, not the mowing.
not the mowing. They're waiting for an MOU
okay, so
regarding the plowing.
we would like a motion that we advise the school that they should pay the two $6,000 outstanding payments owed to the town of Littleton or Parks Department?
Town of
Owed
Littleton.
to the town of Littleton for mowing services,
Mowing,
and that they continue such payments into the future until such time as a MOU between town and school may see fit to change that relationship.
Who is not allowing the release of those funds?
have
The school committee or,
I have only been given one name on the board. I have not been given the full board's name, but
have we
one
sent them an
name.
invoice?
I've sent them an invoice.
Have you said final or we'll?
I've emailed them several times,
Okay.
asked them
Okay, so
where it is.
we have that motion.
So moved.
So move. Second to that motion.
Second.
Second. Okay. Motion by Mel, seconded by Michael for the V. Stevens.
Discussion.
Discussion.
So how do we just make the adjustment to the town for that $6,000 and take it out of the school budget? If the town is actually doing the service, why should we have to wait for the school to pay us? Why can't we just take 6,000 out and put 6,000 in?
You mean shortchange their check for the school taxes?
Well,
$6,000?
I've seen that done before. Endorsement
I could do
acknowledges.
that.
You mentioned we
proper
pay
payment of all
them.
We do pay
Why don't
them.
we pay them minus that amount and let them know in a letter that we're holding it back for our,
Okay,
that's right.
okay.
Okay.
Okay, do you want to sign the next check request to them and deduct the 12,000 from that?
I think that's great.
I think it's a great idea.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, it should get the message across to them.
Okay.
I'll just give you an update too. We are working with them to have an active, updated MOU. We've met with them to talk about, and we gave them a proposal for snow removal. They looked at it, and their first reaction was, and mine too, after they showed me what they pay currently, was maybe we're not the best deal for snow removal. But we're having another meeting where they're gonna give us, next week, I think it is, where they'll give us their feedback. And we should also, I think, at that time, have our MOU for field maintenance.
Okay.
too.
So, okay, we have a motion made and seconded and discussed. Would we like yesterday?
I'd just like to suggest maybe expanding that to just, other than mowing, include seasonal, just use the word seasonal, so then you have the separate seasons. If the committee would support that.
Right,
So that we know
but
that
the
we're
current
just not
arrangement
mowing.
would have been for mowing, all right?
Current arrangement.
Just for
Okay.
mine.
And the selectmen had told me to make sure the 6,000 was in the Parks and Rec budget for 2019 as a revenue. And it is, it's in there, so they will be getting another bill.
Okay, so we have a motion made and seconded and now discussed. All those in favor of sending that notice to the schools, please say aye.
Aye.
Who writes that
All those
notice?
opposed? So that's,
Do you guys write the notice that the budget committee has?
yeah,
has
supported by the budget committee.
supported- Okay,
Is
you
Is there
can
a
write
local,
that
is there a
notice.
local collection agency?
Yeah. Past due. Okay, I mean, I just, if there's some way that we can adjust the budgets at some time, I don't understand why we give it to one and the other does the service.
Well, then the other issue then, Diane, would be to actually take it out of their budget.
Yeah, we
You
could ask them to.
could take
I know.
6,000 out of their budget
Yeah.
and add 6,000
We can do
cars.
that at the next one, at the
Well,
next meeting.
Well, we can suggest that, but then just.
And I can do
Well,
that
yes.
from Georgia. Let you guys figure it out.
Okay, anything else?
I think that's it. So, okay, let's just recap. So I need to correspond with the superintendent about our next meeting with them. It's contingent on their completion of the negotiations for the land acquisition, right? And to let us know, and we will arrange a meeting, is that correct? Is that what, okay. And then the second thing is, you have to let us know if the negotiated agreements come forward on the town side. Let Steve know, and then he'll set up another meeting.
And the two motions that we made as far as funding the land purchase, and how are those motions gonna get to the school?
I can put together an email, send it to Diane, make sure it reads what we've discussed here. If it's okay with her, she could either send it forward, or Andrew could, or
Let
I
Steve and I
could.
to send it forward.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
we'll send
But
it.
yes, if you wouldn't mind, just to make sure we feel comfortable with the wording. We know what the intent is, but.
All right.
Reminder, on January the 9th is a public hearing for the school budget. That's right.
And when's yours?
Which makes me, that's why I need to meet with them before that, so that they present the budget that we,
1/9 and 1/15.
You know, I thought about that. I thought, well, what if it doesn't happen
which one?
before then? That we meet and either approve or disapprove or make adjustment, whatever, to their proposed budget. I think we still have time up until the deliberative session to, you know, basically.
Well, otherwise we catch them off guard. I think we should give them as much time as possible to let them know of our concerns and so they can start working on it.
Okay.
Because then they'll say, well, we don't have time. Because we don't, what I want to do is avoid a deliberative session motion that then catches them off guard and they have to use a machete to go slashing when they could use a scalpel to do some cutting if we suggest that. Does that make sense?
So I will, yes, include that in the message, just so you.
Anything else, folks?
Well, thank you all. I won't see you again. Thank you.
Belated Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you.